What's something you didn't realize was optional in life until you saw someone simply not doing it? Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started. Story 1. I was eliminate myself at my first job, working late, answering emails at 10 p.m., going the extra mile. I thought that's what good employees did. Then I saw a senior guy on my team, super respected, brilliant at his job log off at 4:59 p.m. every single day. I once saw a manager try to give him weekend work, and he just looked at him blankly and said, "No, I won't be doing that. See you Monday." My jaw hit the floor. The world didn't end. He wasn't fired. He just had boundaries. It changed my life. Answer. As much as corporates like all the happy family, bullshit and all that, at the end of the day, there is a contract of employment between me and the company. I trade X amount of hours for Y amount of pay. I am not a registered charity. I don't give extra hours away for free. Those are literally your family and your own private hours. The company isn't going to even remember you 6 months after you've left, but your family will remember you donating those hours to some faceless corporate behemoth for the rest of their lives. Don't do it. Story 2. Saying thank you for the invitation, but we won't be able to make it to a social invite without providing a detailed explanation about why you can't attend. Answer. My mom was going on and on about a family vacation she didn't want to go to, but she was convinced she couldn't get out of it. My aunt ended up asking me to come while my mom was next to me, and I said, "No, thank you." My aunt asked why not, and I said, "I don't want to go." My mom was just staring at me. After my aunt walked away, my mom said it never occurred to her to just say no to the invite. Story 3. Using the fancy cups, plates, etc. Mom was flabbergasted when I made her a cup of tea using the china from her display cabinet. If not now, then when? Why shouldn't we use it when we can? Answer. I used to be guilty of thinking like your mother. I was gifted a beautiful, fancy, too expensive outfit for my newborn 30-some-odd years ago. I never put it on her because I thought it was too fancy for a newborn to slobber and poop all into. As a result, it went without ever being worn. Was a waste of the giver's money and of our closet space, I suppose. In retrospect, I should have used the hell out of it because it cost so much. The only way to get the value out of it would have been to use it excessively. I've tried to keep that in mind ever since. The more it costs, the more it should be used to get the value out of it, not the more it should be kept locked away just to look at, unless it's a painting or something. Story 4. That you don't actually have to have an opinion on everything. Watching someone say, "I don't know enough about that to comment," made me realize silence is an option too. Story 5. A person was talking stupid, and the person didn't argue, but just got up, walked away without saying a word. Answer. My old boss, who was the executive director, would attend trainings or luncheons, etc., just to basically bullshit with people who he wanted to connect with or whatever. I always assumed that he stayed if he was there. We ended up in one at the same time, but we're sitting together for whatever reason. After breakfast and the speaker, he just got up and walked the fudge out. Not in the middle of the training, of course, but it had started. I thought maybe he had some reason he had to leave early, so I asked the office manager about it when I got back, and she was a little confused and said he didn't. So I started watching him closer when we were at the same event, etc., and he did it all the time. If he was interested, he stayed. If not, he just peaced out. And no one said shoot. As a younger person at the beginning of my career, I was fudge floored by this. But it was just social conditioning or whatever, right? No one is forcing you to stay. Life-changing stuff, LOL. Story 6. Your mileage may vary on this one, but sitting through meetings you don't need to be in. When I was an intern, I mentioned to my boss that a certain team's meetings were brutally long and tended to get way more in the weeds than they should. He told me, "Then just leave," and it absolutely blew my mind. You have to know the politics, and I'd advise getting a vibe check from your boss first. But you can almost always say something like, "It sounds like you don't need me for this last part. Is it okay if I go get a head start on this project? Or I have something pretty time sensitive to get to. Are there any things left you need my input on?" And then I just leave. I say it cheerfully. I always follow up on the parts that involve me, and I've never gotten in trouble for it or had it impact my reputation negatively. Don't let yourself be trapped. Edit to add. I have about 7 years of professional experience. I'm not still an intern, just cluelessly watching social cues whiff over my head. Answer. I kind of fudge up in a good way on this one. Half my team was laid off and I was moved to a new team. First day with the new crew, there was a daily morning meeting in which the director would hand out printed task lists for each employee and then have them read out loud to the rest of the team what they were doing that day from her handouts. It seemed like a colossal waste of a half hour to hour every morning. Everyone in the room seemed to absolutely dislike the activity. Clear body language, folded arms, etc., and just kind of smirking when they read their bullshit to everyone. At some point in the proceedings, I spoke up and said something like, "I'm sorry. I know I'm new here. Everyone is just given their task for the day, and that's it, right? I don't get it. What do we all gain from hearing everyone read their papers? What is the point of this meeting?" It was a genuine and innocent-ish question. I really didn't get it. The director, my new boss, turned beet red and stood up and said, "You know what? If this meeting is useless, it is hereby canceled," and stormed out of the room. Everyone sat up and smiled, and there was a general vibe of, "Well, all right." That was the end of the meeting. I got lots of people thanking me, etc. Ha! Apparently, this meeting had been a daily thing for years. I heard later that even though everyone agreed the meeting was useless, that put a mark on me from my boss. She was such a meanie. A couple of years later, my team was laid off, and they cut my pay in half but kept me. I was told, "We want to fire you, but you're too good." Oh, thanks, Goz. I started a job hunt after that. Story 7. Giving a shoot. I don't mean in an apathetic way, but growing up, my parents panicked about every little thing. Going to the store, a DDAR's appointment, a missed piece of mail, dropping a fork, spilling milk on the table. Everything turned into a big deal. But I spent time with other people as a teen adult and realized that wasn't normal. The world doesn't end if you burn a pizza or if the water spills over when boiling pasta. That guy who cut you off isn't the worst part of your day. The staff member at the store checking your ID isn't a bad person. You can just not react to those things, and life gets a whole lot easier. Answer, yes. When I was home for a bit after grad school and decided to make a dentist appointment, I woke up at the usual time I would before a morning appointment to have breakfast, etc. That was the day I realized my anxiety around getting to places on time was really my mom's anxiety about getting to place on time. She freaked out the entire time I was doing my thing at home, telling me all the reasons I needed to leave earlier than I was planning and how I would be late and where to park and I wanted to tell her that by distracting me with all her shoot, she would inevitably make me later. Whenever my brain wants to make anxiety about being anywhere on time, I remind myself that that was a learned trauma response from my mom, and I take a deep breath and I chill the fudge out. Story 8. Quitting. Everyone always says how resilient I am, but truthfully, I just didn't realize I was allowed to quit anything. Story 9. Seeing someone just not force small talk made me realize you don't have to fill every silence. And watching friends say, "I'm too tired to go without guilt," taught me that you're allowed to honor your energy without explaining yourself. Answer. I think one of the signs of a true friendship is the ability to sit in companionable silence for a while. Not all the time, but if you are on a road trip with someone, I think a real tell that they're a good friend is if they aren't constantly trying to engage you in conversation. That it's okay to sit there and enjoy the moment or zone out without it being taken as an insult. Story 10. Clicking no to website cookies. I always accepted because I thought I couldn't view the page otherwise. One day I watched my friend decline, and they just continued as normal. I was silently mind-blown. Story 11. Realizing that I don't have to be responsible for other people's emotions. Like, I am, of course, responsible to behave like a decent human being and treat everyone lovingly and with integrity, but it's up to them how they feel about my actions, and it's their job to manage those emotions, not mine. The flip side, though, was also realizing I am responsible for my own emotions and that I can't put those on anyone else. Answer. This is my most recent life educational journey. I didn't realize until very recently how much I tried to manage everyone else's emotions. All the crud you grow up with weaves its way into adult life in wild and crazy ways. I have, at times, been filled with anxiety about what somebody else might feel if I did not make sure all things were just so, even things that realistically had nothing to do with me. Stopping has been hard and eye-opening, but so freeing. You are responsible for how you feel, and I am responsible for how I feel. Period. I don't behave like a jerk, sure, but I spent 40 years doing the most for too many for reasons that make no sense. Story 12. I grew up Mormon, and it's expected for children to get baptized when they turn 8 years old. This creates a membership record that is kept for the church forever. Some have needed the help of lawyers to get theirs erased after leaving the church. It's pretty much forced in every way except they tell you it's your choice. A girl I knew turned 8 and decided not to get baptized. And all of us kids in the same primary were shocked that you could actually say no and not burst into flames. Looking back, I am so proud of her. Anyways, I'm not Mormon anymore. Story 13. Acting like an adult. I'm almost 50 and play video games every day. I play Fortnite. I run up the stairs on all fours like a dog sometimes. I occasionally buy a Happy Meal because the toy looks fun. I don't give a fudge what anyone thinks about it. You can set your own rules for what an adult is. Story 14. I've got this great ironing hack called Don't Buy Clothes That Need Ironing. I have 2 full suits, a dark gray 3-piece, and a lighter gray 2-piece, 1 pair of khaki dress pants, and 2 dress shirts pressed and starched by our local cleaners, hanging up in my closet along with a couple of ties and all the needed rigmarole. Everything else, it maxes out at business or dress casual, and if it doesn't come out of the dryer and you can hang it up wrinkle-free, it doesn't go into my normal rotation. I don't even own an iron or fabric steamer, and I don't want to hear one word about being lazy. I was in Uncle Sam's floating house of shooty ships for 20 years. I pressed and creased and ironed and spit shined and shaped hats and bloused boots and all that jazz for 2 fudge decades. I paid whatever prove you are capable of maintaining complicated clothing, dues you could even dream of. I'm done. Answer, similar mantra, but from the local municipality of Squirty Fire Engines, and I've ironed at my last fudge shirt. We have an option between wool and Nomex, a synthetic flame-resistant fabric, for our uniforms. Wool looks way better but has to be ironed to dry cleaned regularly. Nomex looks fine and fluffs up wrinkle-free in the dryer. Guess which one I wear. We used to have a mobile dry cleaning service come by the fire stations every couple days, and I think she's out of business. Almost everyone has switched to the hassle-free uniforms. Story 15. I think I was 15 when I realized that I didn't actually have to start smoking. Ever. Every adult I knew smoked, and they always talked about it like obviously I was going to start at some point. They just recommended not to do it too young. Answer, I am thankful for the Healthy Herald bus that came to our school and said that you were just allowed to not drink and smoke. As a kid, it was so normalized, I just thought everyone did it, and it wasn't a choice. I wasn't the smartest kid and very disadvantaged, so very lucky we had that bus as a resource. Probably helped shape my life. 30 years later, that bus is still operating. Have donated to it personally and through corporate programs with one of the companies I work for. Hopefully some kids find it just as useful. Story 16. Responding immediately to every text, email, voicemail. Unless it's an emergency, I'll get back to you at my earliest convenience. Story 17. Dropping toxic friends and, most especially family, out of your life. What do you mean you're not inviting jerk Uncle Frank to Thanksgiving? Yup, it is so good. Story 18. Going to the movies or a show on your own. It felt so weird doing it for the first time, but now I don't give AF. Story 19. Giving and receiving Christmas gifts. Years ago, I saw Melissa Urban make a post on social media about how she holds a boundary about not exchanging gifts. I didn't know that was an option. I told family, I'm not giving gifts anymore, and I won't accept any. Absolute game changer. I used to feel dread about the list of people I had to find gifts for. Even worse, I always felt awkward about receiving gifts. I'm pretty picky and don't want a lot anyway. But people would insist on buying me stuff, and then I would feel guilty about them spending money on something I didn't even want. The holidays are much more enjoyable for me now. Link to the post that helped me, the Boundary Ladies 2023 No Gift Guide. Answer, I had the talk with my family this year. I am disabled in several ways, and Christmas season eliminate me. Between finding ideas and getting in stores to buy them, it is horrendous. I'm also the poorest of my family by far due to not being able to work, so there was always financial pressure that weighed more on me than anyone else, I was honest, and they took that so well. My sister said she still wanted to make me gifts because she hand makes them, and she's very proud. I'm so proud of her too. I like baking though, so we decided that I would do the Christmas baking. As a gift for the family, I expected so much worse, but everyone just said, Christmas is supposed to be about happiness, not stress, and this year is so much better on my mental health already, thanks to that. Story 20. A friend once said something like, please don't take this personally the wrong way, but I'm just really not up for talking right now. And I was so thankful. It saves my jerk from overextending myself socially all the time. Story 21. Calling in sick to work, I thought it was a total no-no and that you'd be penalized permanently. I thought you were expected to work whether you were dying of the flu, bedridden with a migraine, or stuck to the toilet for food poisoning. I called in sick for one shift a few weeks ago when I was riddled with the cold. I am still employed and no one even mentioned it. Answer, when you're ready, call in sick when you're not sick but are overwhelmed and take a mental health day. If you're caught up on your work and not just calling out to avoid real-time sensitive responsibilities or something you've been procrastinating on that you might grow from pushing through and addressing, and you need a break, call in sick and just go for a walk and get yourself a little treat. I do this maybe twice a year when I know my job will be fine without me. And it really helps in a way that a normal weekend doesn't. Story 22. Entertain toxic family members. I grew up with strong family values, which I still have, but when I finally realized it was okay to take space from people who treated me badly, regardless of blood relation, it was so liberating and did loads to improve my mental health. Story 23. In a busy grocery store, picking one of the first checkout lines I see and sticking with it instead of pacing up and down the store to make sure I find the shortest one. And in the car, having my heating on with the window open without worrying about wasting the heat because I like the mix of the warmth with the fresh air, not worrying about wasting food if I'm not hungry and can't save it for later or end up not wanting it later because my body is in a waste bin, not saving any of my clothes for best because why should my nicest clothes be worn the least? Story 24. Answering the phone. My friend was shocked that I often declined calls, and I told them, just because someone has my number doesn't mean they have access to me at any given moment. Story 25. I don't have to make dinner every night. Cereal, cheese with crackers, or peanut butter with fruit is just fine for a meal. Story 26. Everything is optional. Just be aware how your actions impact others and accept the consequences of the things you say and do. Everything else is up to you. Answer. Exactly this. A friend's kid, whom is Gen Z, was letting us all know about how his generation had this figured out. They didn't owe anyone anything and they weren't afraid to say it. This came up after his boss called him to see if he could work a shift next week and he just said no. His dad asked him after the call was over why he said no, because while there was no issue saying as much if you genuinely couldn't, he knew he was free that day. That got us a rant about how he valued his free time and his boss wasn't entitled to it, etc., etc. Sounds great on Reddit, where I'm sure he saw it. Slightly less so in front of people who know you're on break from school and will be spending your days doing sweet fudge. All could absolutely have helped out for a whole 4-hour shift. We pointed out to him he was only half right. He was absolutely entitled to say no without explanation, and it was fine to value your free time, but actions have consequences. And being the guy who never helps out means in turn, you're the guy who nobody else helps out either. As predicted, he rolled his eyes and ignored us. Also as predicted, a few months later, he was back in school and complaining his boss gave all the good shifts, i.e. weekends and other shifts that college kids all want to other people. Gee, I wonder why that happened. You don't need to be a doormat, but some give and take is very much beneficial for everybody. Story 27. Got a 60-o neighbor dude, checks his mail every morning in a bathrobe and tighty-whities with slippers. When my daughter was 3-o, she just grabbed the whole birthday cake and slammed it into her face, said, and just went at it. Those are the levels of unbotheredness I'm working toward. Story 28. Answering the door. If I don't know you, I'm not answering. I get a lot of solicitors who can see me sitting on the couch, but that doesn't mean they are entitled to my time, not to mention breach of safety. Story 29. Realizing you don't have to stay in a conversation you don't want to be in. Someone was complaining endlessly once, and a friend just said, all right, I'm going to head out, and walked away. No drama, no explanation. I was like, wait, you can do that? Story 30. Getting mad when someone cuts you off in traffic. It's not worth the energy you put in. Just move on. Story 31. Identifying with my thoughts. I used to assume that my thoughts and I were the same thing, but as I've been learning more about healing my relationship to self and my nervous system, it's been amazing to separate myself from them. In other words, I don't have to act on react to identify with any of my impulsive, unrealistic thoughts, especially the ones that don't serve me. Story 32. Having to be friends with everyone. I used to think I had to become friends with anyone who approached me. Then I saw people who didn't do that. People who were selective on who of their acquaintances were raised to the category of friend. I now know that I can choose whether to associate with someone or not. Story 33. Not taking part in arguments. It's really difficult to do at the start. Your instinct is to fight your side, but once you start just not participating, it gets easier every time. Then there's the bonus that people just stop arguing with you. They say that you're chill or zen or whatever. It's the zero stress option. Story 34. Didn't necessarily see someone do this, but I realized at some point you can just hang up if you don't want to talk to a scammer. Story 35. As someone with social anxiety, family gatherings, I will still force myself to go to some a few times a year. But when I was younger, the guilt I would get from my family for not showing up. Hell, one Thanksgiving, I was demanded to show up despite having my wisdom teeth out 2 days prior and being in agony and not even being able to eat at the darn event. Adult me now nopes out of everything, and I feel zero guilt or shame because I am choosing that, and I don't owe anyone a darn thing, least of all my time. Story 36. Taking the bait when people are passive-aggressive or heavily insinuating they want something from you but are unwilling to ask outright. The people-pleaser and fawn response in me used to jump to whatever these people were implying. A few years ago, I noticed a good friend of mine pick up those same cues from a mutual friend and remaining stoic rather than working to immediately meet this person's needs, wants despite the manipulative way they were expressing them. I decided that's how I wanted to be too. Now, to get a rise out of me or get something out of me, you have to use your grown-up words and be straightforward, and I'm only offering to do it if I have a desire to do it. It infuriates 1 or 2 of my cattier coworkers, but brings me much peace. Story 37. Adult beverage consumption. I never enjoyed it. Don't like the feeling of being tipsy. Don't like the taste of most of it, aside from those that are 90 juice. Don't like carbonation. And I don't like how it makes me feel the next day. I also discovered a few years ago that it's a big migraine trigger. At every event, I get asked why I'm not drinking. Lots of rumors about me being pregnant or whatever. I don't care. Last party at a pub I went to, I brought my water bottle and kept asking the bartender to top it up for me, which he was more than happy to do. I'm in England, so I feel like people are super shocked here if someone doesn't drink, but I just don't care. Story 38. Saying no without giving a 5-minute apology monologue. I watched someone decline an invite with a simple, I can't make it, and nothing else. No excuse, no over-explaining, no guilt. It blew my mind how peaceful it looked to not justify your existence. Story 39. Engaging. I was raised to engage with everyone or I'm rude and disrespectful. It took me nearly 20 years to realize that no one, and I mean no one, is entitled to my time, attention, or space. That mindset actually led to me being intimacy assaulted on several occasions. It's a work in progress, but at least now I can say no. Story 40. When a cashier asks for an email address, you can say, no, thank you. I don't want their marketing emails. I don't want to prolong a simple transaction when I buy something in person. I just don't want to. Story 41. Being sexy. For some reason, the current culture says women need to be sexy starting at roughly age 8 and going till age 80. Fudge that. I do not need to appeal intimacy to random people as part of my existence. Answer. I used to wear lots of cute but uncomfortable clothing, shoes, bras, panties, etc. before I got married. I was gifted a lot of cute but scratchy lace lingerie from girlfriends before the wedding. I asked my autistic husband which outfits he thought were most sexy. He was like, clothes aren't sexy, they're just clothes. You're most sexy when you're naked. So I tossed all my uncomfortable clothing and started buying clothes for comfort, easy care instructions. Story 42. Showering and washing my hair every day. My skin is dry and switching to every other day has been wonderful. Story 43. Saying no when your manager asks you to come working during your day off. I don't even bother to find an excuse. I just say no. How about asking the people who come working once every century? Story 44. Obtaining permission to do or not do whatever I want. I was raised the eldest daughter in a large family in a very traditional evangelical home. The most essential thing I learned was unwavering obedience. I am a 51-year-old atheist nowadays and have just figured out that I don't need anyone's permission to do what I want to do as long as I'm not hurting anyone. This was a major awakening for me. Story 45. Pretend participation in prayer or political rituals, like saying grace before meals or the Pledge of Allegiance, etc. When I finally decided not to do that anymore, I got a lot of backlash, but I felt better regardless. Story 46. Making one's bed. Why? It's just gonna get messed up again in anyway. Rinse and repeat. I don't make mine, and if someone comes over, I make sure the bedroom door is closed. Answer. I actually saw an article recently saying it's better not to make your bed and let it air out a bit during the day. Unfortunately, I have the dog that likes to lay directly in my spot while I'm not around, so I make mine in the mornings to keep the area under the covers free from his hair and outside debris. I dislike when I lay down and get his hair all stuck on my face. It ends up in my mouth when I sleep. It's just a sensory nightmare for me, but if I didn't have him, I would be airing it out every day. Story 47. Not being a people manager in my career, I'm perfectly fine staying as an individual contributor. I do not need your promotion. stress, or politics. Let somebody else do it. Story 48. I didn't realize that you don't actually have to keep buying new phones every time a shiny one drops. I saw a dude still rocking some ancient brick that looked like it survived 3 world wars, and honestly, he was happier than all of us. Battery lasted all day, 0 notifications, no existential crisis from doom scrolling. That moment hit me like, oh wow, this is optional. I don't need to donate half my paycheck just to have the same phone as everyone else. Meanwhile, his phone probably cost $5 and a sandwich. Answer: buying new phones is expensive and so wasteful. I dislike that so many people feel the need to constantly upgrade when their phones still work perfectly fine. My last phone lasted 8 years, and I was so proud of myself for keeping it so long. I spent months looking for what to change to, and then realized I don't really care about most high-end features since I had used an old phone for so long. So instead of dropping $1K, I just got a 200 phone, and honestly, it's more than enough for me. Only reason I finally swapped was starting to have battery issues and screen bugging out. Perma Phantom keyboard always visible, lol. Otherwise, I'd have waited a bit longer. Story 49. I dress for my comfort now, rather than everyone else's. For years, I thought a lot of clothes were off limits for this chunkster. Then I simply got tired of trying to wrangle myself in and out of a wet one-piece bathing suit every time I had to pee, and I started wearing 2 pieces. Yes, modest bikinis. I was absolutely shocked when the entire beach didn't run screaming for the hills because my poochie tummy was sticking out, and I was so much more comfortable. Now I wear whatever the fudge I want. Story 50. As someone who grew up as a rule follower to the extreme, realizing literally, everything in life is truly optional is so freeing. Yes, we live in a society, so if you choose to do something illegal or hurtful to someone else, there will be natural or legal consequences. But at the end of the day, everything is a choice. I think about this every time someone says they have to do or not do something, or they have no choice. We all have choices. Story 51. Staying until the end of the appointment when the person I am meeting with is not acting professional. I've suffered through so much medical abuse until the point where it clicked. I'm free to go. I'm not kidnapped. You say I'm faking? Good. Let's stop here. I want to talk with someone that will actually figure out what's wrong with my body. Took 7 years to get a diagnosis, but I did. And turns out it's a rare neurological disorder, baby A. You can leave. It is so freeing. Story 52. Having kids. I luckily didn't grow up in a home that pressured me to do so, but all the adults around me did have kids, and I kept hearing, when you have kids, when you become a parent, etc. I was in my late teens, early 20s before I started meeting people who just didn't have kids, lol. And I was like, wait, it's not just a foregone conclusion? Story 53. Don't have to sustain a relationship with family. It is okay to cut off family members who choose to cause you pain. Story 54. Correcting people, arguing with people, changing people. It's not your job to correct people, tell them everything they are doing wrong, or change their beliefs. It's crazy how many grown adults can't understand this. More importantly, how many people will trade off their entire relationship with someone who cares about them over a disagreement over something really stupid that doesn't really matter at all. Yet they just can't accept the fact that someone can be wrong or believe something you disagree with and you still love them. Story 55. Folding my kids' clothes. I have 3 under 9, including toddler twins. The oldest just digs and unfolds until he finds what he's looking for. And when my twins were newborns, it saved me so much time. No one cares about a wrinkled onesie on a newborn or a toddler or an on-the-go older kiddo. I sort by socks underwear, which oldest unfolds and unmatches anyway. Shirts, pants, jammies. Story 56. Trying hard at work. Plenty of people show up at the same time as me or a little bit later, have no urgency, do half the amount of work, leave a little bit early, do nothing at home work related, and get paid the same as me or more. They have no gold stars from their boss. They take a ton of vacation days. They are not standout employees in any sense. And here they are making more than me. Story 57. If you can stop working and retire, and you can stop working and retire, then retire. A bit personal, but early this year, diagnosed with stage 2 hypertension, and 4 months later, diagnosed with cancer. Both very surprising as I'm 54 and pretty fit. My wife and I thought we'd work way longer, but I'm not likely to be around and healthy much past the official retirement age. So I hope all Redditors chose the best option for their circumstances. Good. Story 58. I didn't learn it by seeing someone else do it, but it came from my therapist. Not every thought has merit. You can label your thoughts junk, useful, unhelpful. Our brains like to play tricks on us, especially when fear is triggered. Bringing your reasoning mind online is a skill during those trying times. It has honestly changed my life. I discard so many trash thoughts that come into my mind about, and this has boosted my self-confidence. On top of that, when I have fear spirals, I stop myself and ask, okay, but is that what's happening right now? Anyone suffering with anxiety must benefit from these two techniques. It's honestly saved my life. Story 59. Speaking up when an idea doesn't make sense or work for the team. I used to take work hierarchy very seriously, but as long as you're diplomatic, lower-level employees actually have a perspective that helps C-suite make decisions. Story 60. Giving 2 weeks notice. They will fire you on a whim, and you are supposed to give a fudge about them when you quit? Fudge them. Story 61. You don't have to justify anything. That's completely optional. People try to justify why they don't want to do something all the time, when in reality you can just say no. Give zero explanation and be done with it. Story 62. Dating someone who truly loves you. Not a gimmick. I lived a hard and fast life in my early 20s. Women, booze, partying, etc. I thought all relationships were fleeting and sort of meaningless. Then I met my current GF. Honestly, a revelation. I didn't know a relationship could be this nice and comforting and just stable. Sounds awful, and I don't regret my past, but maybe I feel like I appreciate it more, having lived those experiences. Story 63. Not finishing a book that isn't enjoyable. Maybe it was the long list of required sad literature in K-12 that conditioned me to think you should finish anything you start. But having a friend say they stopped reading a book that I was slogging through was a revelation. Story 64. That you don't have to participate in every argument you're invited to. The day I saw someone simply not engage and protect their peace, it felt like unlocking a cheat code. Story 65. Being in a romantic relationship of you don't want to be. You're literally just allowed to be single forever if you want. Story 66. My coworker had to practically beat this into me. I work a minimum wage job. I overperform, little to no recognition beyond the you should get recognized. So he kept telling me to stop working harder than the job is paying me to. It took me being denied a one raise for more hours and responsibilities before it translated for me. If they won't pay me what I'm worth as an employee, I'll only work what they pay me. Stop trying to be so perfect at my job. Nothing happened. I didn't get in trouble, lol. My whole life grew up with parents that said, even if it's not your responsibility, you should still be able to do it too. So it was hard to learn how to walk away from things beyond my paycheck and how much customer abuse was within my check before I turned off my customer service voice. And if my coworker failed to do their responsibilities, I didn't bend over backwards to cover them. Life is less stressful, lol. Story 67. Getting on somebody else's bandwagon to fit in. People should just be themselves and have their own opinions, even if it isn't popular at the time. Story 68. It may sound dumb, but religion. I never wanted to be religious, but I didn't realize I could just not. Story 69. Eating meat. I never really liked it. Fat and bones and gristle really grossed me out. But my parents were health nuts and really good cooks. So I thought that's what was done. 32 years later, no regrets and no meat. But I want to say, no judgment. If meat's your jam, go for it. It's just not for me. Story 70. Constantly talking when hanging out with friends. Used to always try to fill in the silence when we were walking or waiting in line. But I realized it's way more enjoyable for everybody to just not talk for a bit. Not ignoring them or anything, but sometimes walking for 2 minutes without talking can be nice. Story 71. Explaining why you are turning down an invitation. Just say, I'm sorry, I can't make it. If you get pushback, say that I really don't want to go into details. You may have trouble getting some people to accept this, but try really hard to hold the line. Hopefully they will eventually learn to respect your privacy. I know people who come up with elaborate excuses and often end up in a I Love Lucy style sitcom situation where they have to dig themselves deeper into fibbing or roping other people into their lie because of it. Just don't go there. Story 72. I'm late to this, so nobody will see this. But for me, it's responding to work-related things when you're off the clock. When I was hired, HR made a point to tell us that if we do anything work-related off the clock, we have to do a time adjustment to get paid for it. But then all my coworkers made a Facebook chat about work and used it around the clock, and added me to it. A guy in a different department just matter-of-factly told me in passing that he doesn't answer work phone calls or do work messages, etc. If he's on the clock, people can talk to him in person, and if he's not, they don't exist to him. My mind was blown. I immediately removed myself from the FB group and deleted people from my social media who weren't friends, just coworkers. The one time that HR called me to complain that I had posted about work on my social media, I told them I didn't mention the company by name, and they were very quiet as they realized that I in fact had not. They said, well, next time just come to us instead of posting about issues. And as soon as I hung up, I blocked their number. Been there another near decade since then without issues. And they never asked me to come in on my day off because they can't get a hold of me, LOL. Story 73. I am from a family of emotionally constipated white people in the countryside. They never say no, they just eat their feelings. It's a long story, but I ended up in an all-black office, except me, in Philadelphia, and one of the women was asked to do something she didn't want to do, and she snapped back. Why would I do that? It's a small thing, but it was revelatory at the time. With practice, I've come to a place that I never do something I don't want to do unless there's a good reason for it. Story 74. I, for some reason, always thought when you go get takeout, like McDonald's or some sort of drive-through, that you can just get one drink. Until one day I went with my buddy and he got two drinks. Two drinks, an iced coffee and a smoothie. A new world unlocked for me that day. Life hack. You can get as many different drinks as you want. Story 75. Over-apologizing. I learned something wild from a Target self-checkout worker like 10 years ago. I kept having issues and she had to come over a bunch of times, and every single time I was apologizing like I ruined her whole day. She finally just looked at me and was like, "Do you have anxiety?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually, LOL." Then she told me she was taking a psych class and learned that people who over-apologize do it as a coping thing in social situations, and she basically told me to stop saying sorry for her literally doing her job. At first, I was kind of taken aback and low-key annoyed, but honestly, I'm really thankful for it now. I used to apologize for stuff that wasn't even my fault. Maybe it came from childhood and just followed me into adulthood, but I'm not like that anymore. That moment was a weird little wake-up call for me, and it stuck. Story 76. Shaving my legs. I met a woman one day with all her hair on her legs, and at first I had the typical reaction of UW gross. But then I said, I guess it really is just optional grooming. Now, the only time I shave my legs is if I'm going to a wedding or other large event occasion. Like I was an extra in a music video kind of thing. I get looks all the time, but I've been hairy for years now, and the only people who have ever confronted me about it have been children and my in-laws, and my Mael now finds it somewhat charming, lol. Story 77. The Pledge of Allegiance. Broke my little mind when I saw someone sitting down and reading a book during the pledge in 6th grade, and now I don't stand or recite the pledge. Answer: yep, this one. I remember the Jehovah's Witness kids not standing and knew their reasoning. Then one day a sub didn't stand and simply said, "You know you don't have to." Never did another day at school. Always thought the whole thing was super weird. When I was in kindergarten, the parents were at school for some sort of event, and they played the national anthem, and my mom didn't stand. People side-eyed her until she spoke up and said in her incredibly thick Irish accent, "It's not my anthem." Story 78. I did not realize you do not have to immediately get into the shower and suffer through cold water hitting your entire body in the winter. You can leave it on for a minute and then step in. You do not get some kind of toughness award for freezing. Story 79. I'm still working on it, but apparently you can just tell people how you're feeling or what you want. You don't have to be quiet, hoping people will read your mind. You also don't have to do what they want if you want to do something else. It's crazy. Story 80. Casually ordering a mocktail or sparkling water when everyone else is drinking adult beverage and you don't want to fake a sip in order to not offend. When I realized no one actually cares and drinking adult beverage wasn't mandatory, my life changed. Story 81. Accepting that you can only have 4 drinks out of your soda before it's all ice. Just go back into McDonald's later the same day and refill your fountain drink. No one has ever stopped me. Story 82. I rarely use a knife to cut up food at home anymore. Kitchen shears are quicker. I started using them for my kids' food. Now I pre-cut my own food at the same time. We use them so much that we now own 4 pairs, so some are always clean. Story 83. Your phone is there for your convenience, not others. You don't have to answer it. You don't have to text back. You don't owe anyone access to you or your time. It was truly a game changer to discover this. Story 84. Calling off from work and day drinking. You don't have to get partied too hard. Just a nice even buzz. I like watching old TV shows while I do it. Story 85. Removing people you don't like off social media. During college, everyone has like 2K followers, and I was so confused until I finally realized 90 of them. They don't like each other. It's kind of weird, but I finally stopped giving in to social media pressure. Story 86. Matching socks. I just throw them in my sock drawer and then wear the first two I pull out in the morning. Story 87. Vaccines. I grew up thinking that it was just a thing everyone didn't think that it was an optional thing. Then I learned that people don't get their kids regularly vaccinated or actively avoid them. I am completely pro-vaccines and don't really think they should be optional outside of medical exemptions. Story 88. A little different because it was something that I slowly realized. When I was younger, like between the ages of 7 to 15 years old, I thought that every man goes to prison or jail at some point in life, and I would sometimes wonder what I was going to do to be put in prison. I also thought that I was probably going to die before turning 18 due to gang violence. I guess it was just the environment that I lived in. My father went to jail for beating my mom. Other guys that lived in our apartment complex went to prison as well. There was gang activity all over the neighborhood, and hearing about drive-by shootings wasn't uncommon. It wasn't until I was nearing the end of high school that I realized that I'm pretty darn far from living that sort of life. Although I thought I was going to treat when I was abducted and robbed at gunpoint when I was 19, but that was more of a wrong place at the wrong time situation. Looking back on it now, I think TV and movies amplify the impression of my environment. I didn't notice that most of my family and friends weren't involved with that type of life. The bad stuff around me just had a bigger space in my head than the good back then. Writing this out now, it's kind of making me realize that I went through some trauma that could have fudged me up. Story 89. You don't have to spend hours cooking a turkey dinner for 20 relatives you don't like at Xmas. You can do microwave curry for just your household, stay in pajamas all day, and not have anyone else in your house that doesn't live there. We stopped either having people round on Xmas Day or running around visiting people, and we also have a vote on what dinner will be as nobody really likes turkey. Last 2 years it's been beef short ribs with various sides. This year it's crispy duck and other Chinese stuff. It's also a lot easier to buy the dinner when it's not the thing the rest of the country is trying to buy. Story 90. I, 39F, am under no obligation to ever wear makeup or shave any part of my body. So I stopped about 15 years ago. Life is much easier. Story 91. Living in a one-bedroom apartment over a studio. Why am I paying hundreds extra for a wall and door? A studio is cozy and all the space I need. Story 92. Not making dinner. I realize my family will eat pretty much anything we have in the house. Cheese and crackers, ramen, microwave meals, peanut butter toast, etc. Now, when I'm tired, I just let us scavenge whatever we can find, and no one really cares. I don't know why I worried about it being a proper meal for so long. Story 93. Not shaving your body hair. I remember this girl I really looked up to. Artsy, confident, funny. She had leg hair and it kind of blew my mind. Like I can just have leg hair and still be considered cool and likable was truly a moment of reflection. Female beauty standards are pretty crazy regarding body hair. Story 94. This will sound fake, but sucking peen. I thought it was a part of intimacy that everyone just did. I was shocked when I found out there were folks out here not doing oral both orals. Story 95. I had a job where when it was someone's birthday, they sent around a card and a list of everyone's names. So once you signed the card, you crossed your name off and found the next person who needed to sign. I was sick of these stupid cards for random coworkers I didn't even talk to. I asked the person in charge of sending around the cards to take me off the card list. Apparently, when other people found out and realized they didn't have to sign birthday cards all the time, they asked to be taken off too. I heard the card lady cried. Story 96. Paying hundreds of dollars a month on a phone bill. I have 2 lines for $80, prepaid. No surprises. The phones are not the newest models. I am just fine with that. Story 97. As a kid, I always thought that pretty much everyone straight ended up having kids, whether they thought they would as kids or not. That most people who didn't want them changed their minds, and that if married couples didn't have any, it was probably because they couldn't and didn't want to adopt. Now I know better. There are plenty of people in this world who just choose to remain childless for a lot of reasons, including myself. People don't always want them to begin with, and don't just change their minds as much as I thought back then. I did a lot of sitting when I was young, and for short periods of time, I enjoyed being around kids, but the longer assignments where I had to be the only adult there for longer than 24 hours were too hard on me mentally. I just couldn't wait to leave even if the kids were good the whole time. That showed me I was right in thinking that I was not going to be a good parent, because parents do have to take care of their kids 247 most of the time. Most of them, between that and my parents verbally and physically abusing me and making me their parent practically much of the time, I wasn't in a good headspace to raise any of my own. I'm glad I never did go there. I was so naive about that, though, when I was like 10. Story 98. I've only just realized that I don't have to take on unrequested feedback about my personal habits and that not everyone's opinion is valid to me. I'm 45. Story 99. I was going through a divorce at age 36, overall freaking out about running out of time when I realized I didn't need to have kids and could just date child-free guys. It ended up being a fantastic decision. It's a decade later, 7 years of those remarried, and I'm actually relieved I never had kids. Story 100. Dieting. It's not a moral failing to not be on a diet, and it doesn't make you a better person if you're skinny. Story 101. Something I learned in managing challenging conversations at work. Not every question is one that requires a response. I'm not talking about ignoring people or even setting boundaries. A lot of questions that come up in high distress situations are emotional questions rather than literal questions that need an answer. Don't engage with these and continue to direct the conversation the way you need while acknowledging the underlying emotion. Story 102. Not having to listen to what happened in someone's day. Had a friend who would just unload all the minutiae and all the perceived slights to her that happened at work. One day I had a really rough day and needed to talk about it to know if I was wrong, etc. I started, but she cut me off. Surely this is your problem for you to sort out. I was flabbergasted, realized I didn't have to listen to her issues after that. Story 103. Having kids? Grew up in the Midwest. In the 80s, 90s, it was just what you did. Then I realized one day that it's totally optional. Story 104. I have no idea whether it was a choice or not, but my favorite teacher in primary school had no kids. And that was the first time I internalized that you don't have to have kids, even if you like kids and are married and grown up and everything. Story 105. This is a low-stakes one. A lot of times when I'm shopping, cashiers will say something like, "And what's a good phone number for you?" Or "What's your email address?" Many people will just give their phone number or email or zip code, whatever. But that's totally optional. I always say no thank you. They're just instructed to phrase it in a way to make you think you have to provide the info in order to check out because companies want your data. But you can just say no. Story 106. Not being nice to family you dislike just because you are related to them. You wouldn't do it for anyone else. Why punish yourself because of DNA? Story 107. Parenthood. I saw people deciding not to have children and enjoying their lives, and it was an eye-opener. Story 108. 90 of hanging folding clothes. Bought a bunch of clear acrylic bins drawers and collapsible fabric bins for most of my clothes and only fold pants and hang things I don't wear often. Also, folding sheets. Nah, just shove the whole set inside a pillowcase. Story 109. Being Asian, I was floored when I went to a non-Asian person's home and saw them wear shoes inside. Story 110. Saying no to a parent. I encouraged my kids to do it because I wasn't allowed that option. My son told his father no, and I was so proud of him. After that, I discovered my own ability to say no. Now I am proud of us both. Story 111. You don't have to eat what you cook, especially if you jack it up. You can throw it out and order takeout. It'll be okay. Story 112. You don't have to fight every battle. You don't have to see everything as a battle that needs to be fought. You can just choose to not engage in things that don't matter in your life. Story 113. You can buy all identical socks and never have to match them again. You can buy all black athletic socks and wear them for everything and never have dirty-looking socks again. You cannot buy anything that needs to be washed separately. No whites. There are gray and black underwear. You can just pull stuff out of the dryer when hot and hang it up and never iron. If it doesn't work with a particular fabric, you don't need that fabric. Controversial. Jeans are like jean jackets. You can wear them until something spills on them or a week, whichever comes first. Story 114. Staying in toxic friendships. You can walk away and protect your peace, and breakups don't have to be romantic ones. Story 115. Don't work full-time just because adults do so. If you can pay your bills with smaller hours, work less. Story 116. Having intimacy. When I grew up, everyone was like, "When you'll have intimacy," as if it was a mandatory milestone in your life. And I was quite distressed at the thought you had to do it, when nothing pushed me to do it while people around me were having intimacy with other people. Then I learned what asexuality was, and that there were other people like me who just weren't intimacy attracted to anyone, and that you can live a fulfilling life without having to have intimacy. Story 117. Shaving. Women are raised as it being required to be feminine or sexy, and I'm so glad I realized it was optional, and you're still feminine and sexy. I love my hairy armpits and legs, and I'll never go back. Story 118. Shaving as a woman. Unless it's actually uncomfortable for the woman herself, women are only doing this for men. I came to this realization coming out as a lesbian and being around lesbians that don't shave. It was like, oh, I literally don't have to do this unless I feel like it. And a girl that wants me won't give a darn either way. Story 119. People pleasing, and I'm still working on not doing it. The first time I saw someone not going along to get along and actually saying how they felt, even though they knew the other person wouldn't be happy about it, I about shoot my pants with anxiety. Whether it's learned, inherent, or some combination, I've always felt it's required to make sure everyone is happy all the time, no matter what. Story 120. Heading into a meeting once I, 35, anxiously asked my colleague, 55, if my outfit was okay. She said, I don't know. I stopped needing to be the most beautiful person in the room years ago. She delivered it in such an honest and loving way. It stuck with me and has been so freeing. Replace beautiful with anything, it still works. When you stop focusing on being the best XYZ in other people's eyes, you have a lot more room to enjoy the present moment. Story 121. Having to be good at everything I do, especially hobbies or sports. It turns out you can just do something because you love it and be proud of what you're learning. Story 122. I haven't shaved my legs or armpits since I was maybe 16. I'm 33 now. Only a few other women have given me shit about it. No man I've dated or had intimacy with has actually cared or been turned off by it. It's such a ridiculous waste of time and money, and throughout all of ancient human history, all of the hottest women had lots of body hair. Women shaving their body hair only became a thing when razor companies realized they could make more money by trying to convince women that they needed to use them. Story 123. Not having a flat sheet and blanket in between the comforter and the fitted sheet? Not necessary, Mom. Story 124. Having a duvet on the bed. Growing up, that's what we had. Everyone else had them too. So when I moved out, that's what I had. I absolutely dislike making the bed. No amount of hacks made it easy to get a duvet inside its cover. A few years ago, I came to the realization that I could just not have one. Got myself a couple of really luxe blankets to go over the sheets and done. I mean, I still don't love making the bed, but it's no longer the worst chore, and I'm just as cozy as I ever was. Story 125. So many things. You don't have to buy a car. You don't have to be up on all trends. Do you have to buy a house? No. Story 126. I'm old enough to remember when a bank would give you a passport-size folder when you opened a savings account. When you made a deposit or a withdrawal, they would stamp it with the amount and date. I was at work one day and my coworker was writing in her savings account folder. I'd always thought of it as belonging to the bank and only they could make entries. I asked her and she said she liked to make a note about what the deposit was or what she was taking money out for. Literally blew my mind. Story 127. I saw somebody leave halfway through a first date because they weren't feeling it. She was Russian, and I had it explained to me that that's just how you do in Russia. Most polite thing to do is leave the second you feel that it's not going to work out. The earlier, the better to save everybody time and money. Apparently, culturally, there are no hard feelings about ending a day early beyond the rejection. I have adopted that. People don't like it. Story 128. Not allowing the night nurse vampires in the hospital to draw blood in the middle of the night. Just tell them you want to sleep at night. Story 129. I have two, actually. One, responding to text immediately. I used to feel so much pressure to respond right away. LOL, not anymore. I realize that nothing bad will happen if I simply don't respond if I don't feel like it. If it's that important, they can always call. 2, keeping friendships alive out of obligation. Not for me. I'm naturally an introverted person. I'm kind and very friendly, but I can't force myself to have a real friendship with someone because that means I'll have to force myself to actually hang out with them and do things that I don't really feel like doing. Story 130. Mine is the opposite. I realized it is never worth it to justify a sick day by never once hearing someone try to without sounding full of it. I just send an email with the name and the date. I won't be in due to illness. I expect to return tomorrow or whatever. Short, sweet, done. Anyone who makes a fuss or insists on more info, I tell them I've had an arousal lasting more than 4 hours. That usually stops the questions. Story 131. Religion. As I stopped believing the stories I'd been raised with, I looked around for different religions. One that didn't expect me to believe stuff that wasn't true. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I realized that religion is like watching football. You can just opt out of it entirely. Story 132. Listening to people insult you. I'm a whole jerk adult, and I can literally just stand up and walk away. Story 133. Answer the door or the phone. Get married, have kids. Monogamy versus ethical non-monogamy. Ride the romantic relationship escalator. Attend every argument you're invited to. Story 134. Getting old. All my friends hit 30 and suddenly were like, oh, I'm too tired for that fun thing you want to do. My hobbies are now binge watching TV and MCU movies. I go to bed at 8 and get up early to hang out by myself in the kitchen. Turns out there are communities of so many people that manage to live interesting lives and hold down jobs. They do fun stuff and do the adult stuff too. Imagine that. Story 135. Buying the upgrade. I got caught into a circle of new cars, new phones, new cameras. Then I realized I could drive a nice vintage classic, keep my phone until it literally no longer works, and go keep a decent camera with a great lens for as long as I enjoy using it. I've saved a ton of money and mental energy since then. Story 136. Sharing personal information with family or friends. A friend went on a big vacation by herself and never mentioned it to her family because she didn't want to hear any negativity. Later, I took that to heart and have never shared a fun, exciting thing that happened to me BC. I just wanted to keep the memory pure and to myself with no comments or unasked for feedback. Story 137. I didn't know that you could be a decent person and also non-religious at the same time until I was about 14, 15. I thought you were either an intense Christian or a secular heathen who was lost in a world of dark, godless sins. Story 138. I was working at a shoot-jerk warehouse job during college, and one of the best things I ever learned was from this old man, Jack. Jack was a calm, mild-mannered old grandpa. He usually kept to himself, but chiming in with the lamest, in the best way, dad jokes. We got this new supervisor, and she was just the biggest fudge jerk. Everything was her way or the highway. She was about 4'11" on a good day, but she loved to throw her weight around. Nobody liked her. One day, Jack made a simple mistake, and she lost her goddamn mind over it. She was just standing in front of his workbench, screaming at him, and without missing a beat, Jack simply stands up, tells her, if you'd like to have a conversation like adults, we can, but if you're just going to stand here and yell at me, I'm just going to go home. And he did exactly that. He clocked out, walked out to his car, and just went home. I will never forget the look on her dumb face because that was not at all the reaction she was looking for. Since then, I don't let people scream at me. Thanks, Jack. Story 139. Identifying as a binary gender. Mine was irreversibly blown when I met my first non-binary person. Like that was an option this whole time and no one thought to mention it. Story 140. Not doing the buying it for life. Making things for life. The mindset of buying something in the framing that it's only temporary wasn't something I adopted for a long time. Story 141. I'm Argentinian, so kissing every single person in a room in the cheek to say hello. Some men always managed to grab my hips when I did it, and it made me so uncomfortable. When I saw my sister not do it, it just changed my mindset. Story 142. Dropping friends who don't return any effort. I'd rather be friendless than constantly being the only one to make plans to see each other and them always canceling last minute. They obviously don't want to see me. Story 143. Having kids. As a child, I thought women just got pregnant. Like with puberty, how you just naturally get a period. I was terrified. I think I was 7 and internally spiraling about childbirth until I learned it doesn't happen like that. The relief was unlike any other LOL. Story 144. You don't have to agree or disagree with anyone who is giving you advice. Just say, thank you, I will consider that. Then ignore it or consider it. No fuss, no muss. Story 145. Training your boss. Only answer most of your calls. Never all of them. It keeps their expectations realistic, and ideally the boss thinks you're too busy. This works very well if you're good at your job and indispensable. Story 146. Putting up with assholes in a social scene. A guy I know joined one and told an elitist male body part with a lot of clout that he was just a guy and had no reason to care about his shoot opinions. The jerk couldn't do anything but take it. Story 147. I could choose to stop drinking adult beverage simply because I didn't like it, and it made me feel bad. I didn't need to be a recovering alcoholic, pregnant, on medication, or any other reasonable excuse. I heard someone talking about plant substance, how they didn't like how it made them feel and used the phrase, it's just not my substances. I realized I had spent years looking for a way to make a particular substances work for me, and I was allowed to just not do that substances. So yeah, I mostly microdose plant substance now if I'm looking for a way to relax at the end of the week or at a party. Story 148. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you look a certain way, why you're disabled, why you're wearing big headphones, why you test in a special room aside from everyone else, why you wear a knee brace or have braces as an adult or are wearing a turtleneck in the summer. You don't owe shoot to them, curious or not. Story 149. Caring at all if someone is driving crazy in traffic. Cut me off? Have at it, hoss. Hope it makes you feel good. Story 150. FOMO. I'm simply not afraid of missing out on something. If I wanted to be there, I would be there. I used to be so nervous saying no to invitations or missing events, and I just know my couch or bed is a better place to be. Story 151. Masking your autism all the time. Sure, at work or at grandma's birthday party, you gotta be normal. But at home or walking down a safe street, flap your darn hands, spin around in circles, sing along to the tune in your head, be yourself. Story 152. Pulling out baby teeth. I had all of mine pulled outside of a dentist setting, some even when they weren't fully ready to come out yet. I have a lot of dental-related trauma because of it now. When my son lost his first tooth, it simply fell out on its own with little to no bleeding and no pain whatsoever. He always said no to us pulling it, a luxury I was not afforded, and we always respected his wishes, and every tooth so far has come out on its own. So happy I don't have to pass on that generational curse to him. Story 153. Interacting with people who don't like you. Turns out you can just ignore them. For some reason they dislike that. Never understood the lack of logic. Why waste time and energy on people you don't like? That's how people turns into demons in Journey to the West. Story 154. Saying goodbye at the end of the night and just leaving. None of this would you like. Leftovers. Oh, here's this random thing, etc. And leaving 30 minutes later. Story 155. I didn't realize being an atheist or another religion was an option until a classmate said his dad didn't believe in God. I was probably 7 or 8. Story 156. Having periods. Getting my first IUD in my 30s was one of the best decisions I've ever made. Even though it's incredibly painful to get and change, it's 8 years of pure unbothered heaven. Story 157. I remember as a young teenager seeing a woman with hair on her legs and under her arms, and I was astonished. I thought shaving was just required. My gas was flabbered. Story 158. Jobs. Minimum fudge wage even. Requiring you to have a smartphone, one to participate in capitalist society. I said no. Lost 10 jobs, got a smartphone, and had $300, 500 messages a day. I got in trouble for not looking at every message. I do not owe a fast food joint or a movie theater. 4 hours of my attention, irony point. I'm required to look at my phone constantly for them, but I glanced at my phone once and got written up. Make up your minds, cunts. Story 159. Shaving your genitals. I grew up doing dance and gymnastics, and I was taught that we must shave everything from the moment you got hair. And I just thought it was a life thing. I was well into my early 20s when I realized not everyone shaved down there. Story 160. Engaging with people who are angry and/or insulting you. Saw a guy just wait for her to finish raging at him, and then he just wordlessly walked away and struck up a conversation with his friends. I thought I had to respond and got myself into so many stupid arguments. He said there was nothing there for me, so I walked away. Oh yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Story 161. Tolerating and placating abuse from my mother. I was in my late 30s before I ever even dared to disagree with her. Story 162. I was like 29 when I learned I could say, sorry, boss, I have too much on my plate right now. I don't think I can realistically get task done in a timely manner. I put myself in his shoes and what I would want if I were him. He knows I'm not incompetent, but he knows he needs it done. Now he knows that task needs to go to someone else instead of the end of the day rolling around and finding out it isn't done. That's his job as a manager. Story 163. I moved this year and started a new job a month after. Putting away my clothes took so long and the motivation was just not there. I created a pile of clean clothes for when my brain and body just can't hang and fold. I also don't have to fold all at once either. I can do part of it and walk away. Being an adult is weird. Story 164. My mind was blown the time I saw a guy pick up a bunch of bananas, break off 3, and put them in the sack. You buy them by the pound, you don't have to buy the whole bunch. Story 165. Talking to certain members of your family for the simple sake that they are family. Once I stopped that shoot, I felt so much more free. Story 166. Being liked. I don't have to set the record straight on rumors. I don't have to bend over backwards for everyone or anyone. I don't have to worry about making a good impression. Story 167. going to a DHS appointment, and opting out of getting on the scale. This was a source of enormous stress for me. And one day my husband told me to just say no, not today. And holy cow, I may get a look, but all but one nurse just said okay and moved on. I'm not overweight, but I do have ED and major hangups about my weight. This has been so liberating. Of course, if the appointment was concerning anything about my weight diet, I would comply. Story 168. Accepting between the lines communication. You can either say what you mean or not. I'm going to take it at face value either way. Story 169. Still working on this, but spending your emotional energy on things that other people say to you. Now I can mostly just turn off that switch if someone is rude to me or makes a snide comment or says something I don't like. If I'm not losing anything by not responding, I don't give it any headspace. Save me a lot of energy. Story 170. You don't need to wait for a special event to buy yourself a box of fancy chocolates. You just have to wait for a paycheck big enough to afford to do so. Story 171. I have dinner for breakfast quite often. I'm not a huge breakfast food eater, and I can have healthy dinner foods for breakfast. Story 172. Giving gifts to everyone during Christmas. My parents' generation would buy gifts for everybody. I guess it was a show of wealth. People don't remember if you gave them a gift or not. I only give gifts to people I truly care about. Story 173. Bananas. Always took the whole darn bunch. I didn't know you could snap off however many you didn't want. Story 174. I would always get anxious around salespeople inside stores and shopping malls. The pushy people that start asking you what your phone service is, or if you rent or own a home. Then I started ignoring them. You can literally just walk past these people. Story 175. As a woman doing all the work of maintaining relationships for the whole family, being married doesn't mean it's now my job to do Christmas presents, birthday cards, and general emotional labor for my husband's whole family too. His mom is disappointed that I haven't stepped into that role, but that's her problem, not mine. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchus. See you soon.